Hi. Hello. Welcome to this episode of Ask the Service Provider. I am here with Patrick Murtha. Patrick, how's it going, man? You're looking sharp today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's spring, so I'm doing some pinks and some light blues, but I appreciate it. Um, I'm I'm good. Just social distancing, etc. But doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, man. I'm doing pretty well. As well, social distancing, trying to manage the stress, trying to manage everything going on in life right now with homeschooling and trying to run a business as you're familiar being my accountant.
Yeah, absolutely, and also a business owner. So
Right, exactly. So I know there's been a lot of updates. There's been a lot of things going on with the CARES Act relief. So just help us to know where we are today. You gave us, you guys, your team, Kyle and Tom, your partner and dad, gave us a lot of information on our last webinar. People can find that on clemcoav.com YouTube page. But help us understand what's the latest.
yeah, so I think anybody who is who owns their own business or is self-employed or has employees, et cetera, has definitely been keeping a little bit of an eye on what's going on with the SBA relief that's been coming out. So wanted to talk a little bit about that today. And then really everybody, almost everybody is in some way going to be affected by the stimulus, the individual stimulus. So I want to talk about a little bit about that today as well. So anybody watching the news has seen that the stimulus checks, the direct deposits have started going out. So the last we saw, about 80 million have gone out, which is a pretty big number, really, if you think about it. But I can tell you, our CPA firm, we've been getting a lot of calls from clients of ours who did not receive it and want to know why. So we're kind of looking at their situations, and we're able to confirm, yes, based on the rules, you are definitely eligible. And the more we look into it, we're seeing that the IRS is they released a tool, and you can find that tool on irs.gov, the website irs.gov. What you are supposed to be able to do with that website is type in your information, your social, your address, your name, and actually see not only whether or not you're eligible for the stimulus check, but also update your address and your direct deposit information, because obviously a lot of people move, a lot of people change banks. So a lot of my clients are calling me saying, hey, I moved, I changed banks or whatever have you. What am I going to do? So the answer was, I don't know, for a long time. But now if you go to irs.gov, you are able to log on there and you are able to make those changes. However, several of my clients, as a matter of fact, myself included, are getting an error message that says payment status not available. That does not appear to mean you're not eligible for the payment. It seems to just mean that the IRS hasn't updated your information yet, and you're not able to log in yet. So we're kind of telling our clients at this point, be patient. Hopefully we'll be hearing very soon, and we'll get some good news soon on that process and that system.
Now, a little sidebar about that. We also saw in the news about some people having their checks misplaced because it's going through a tax preparer, and
Right.
then it gets pushed back to the IRS instead of going directly to the individual. Is that a concern that you've heard about from some of your clients, or what is the status on that?
From my understanding is most of that is certain. We don't provide this service, but it's called refund anticipation loans. And essentially, the way it works is, let's say that you go to H&R Block or you go to TurboTax and you have your return prepared. What they'll do is they will the company can actually front you the money basically as a loan, and then you repay the loan once your refund comes through, which typically takes 2 to 3 weeks. So the problem is, in those cases, the refund ends up going to a separate bank account that isn't actually a bank account that you own. It's a bank account that's held by TurboTax or by H&R Block or whomever is providing the service, and the government knows that this isn't actually your bank account. So that's part of what that tool I was talking about can be useful for. Is if you did use that service through a tax preparer, you will want to go and update that. Now, if you don't update it, or if you're unable to update it because of glitches, which is essentially what it is, it's a glitch. The IRS will, they're saying that they will send you a check to your address.
Okay. So hopefully
How
those
long?
people aren't right. How long does that take? We don't know, but
Yeah,
hopefully those people won't lose their spot, or lose that funding because of
I'm very
situations like that.
I'm very hopeful it's going to roll out quickly. I think the IRS and everybody knows that this needs to go out quickly. People need the money right now, obviously. So hopefully it goes quickly, and hopefully, even if you are getting a paper check, hopefully we start seeing those in the next couple of weeks. But obviously, these are unprecedented, challenging times, and there's a lot of uncertainty about how these systems work and how these processes are going to work, because there's no case study. There's no, there's no
Yeah.
situation where you can go back and say, hey, back when, the epidemic of 1995 happened, this is how it happened. So we just don't know.
Right, right. And so from that same standpoint, we were initially talking about for the EIDL, $10,000 per person. Now it's $1,000, or based on the number of employees that you have. Is that correct? Or are there any updates on that? What have you heard?
Yeah. So last week, the Small Business Administration, the SBA, kind of quietly announced, hey, originally these were going to be, you can request the loan up to $2 million, and you can have up to 10,000 advanced to you right up front. And allegedly, it was supposed to be paid out in 3 days. Well, last week they kind of quietly announced that it's not just a free $10,000. It's going to be based on the number of employees you have, up to it's basically 1,000 per employee, up to $10,000. We have had some clients of ours that we have heard were actually paid on the EIDL. So it is happening, and that was the controversy was, people were applying for these loans, and several weeks had gone by and nobody had received their advance. So we have had some clients that have received the advance, but it's been according to those rules. It's been according to, like, we have one client who has 5 employees, including themselves, and they actually received 5,000, not the 10,000 that they were expecting. Additionally, they are also limiting the amount. So originally it was supposed to be a $2 million not for everybody, but up to a $2 million loan. And now I believe it's capped at 20,000 or 25,000. So it's a much smaller capital injection than what people were told originally. So definitely a lot of controversy about the EIDL and how that's rolled out.
Yeah. So one of our viewers just messaged and said that they received their stimulus money deposited 2 days ago. No PP or EIDL just yet. Now, my question or wondering is, with that stimulus money coming in, say you pay taxes, right? You don't get refunds. Does that affect whether or not you receive that stimulus, or if that stimulus is a forward payment, or is it a loan, or is it just money that they're really just giving out?
So the stimulus it's really, I've never seen anything remotely like this in my life. So basically, if you're eligible for the payment, it's not taxable, so it's not income. It's irrelevant whether or not you owe, or if you generally have a refund. So it's not based on your refund on your prior tax return. It's solely based on your income. So if you're single, it's 75,000. If you're married, it's 150,000. Above that AGI, that we're talking about adjusted gross income, above those AGIs, it starts to be limited to a degree. And then you also get an additional $500 per child who's 16 or under.
Mm-hmm.
So a family of 4 with 2 kids that are under 16, assuming they're under 150,000 of AGI, they're going to get 12,000 for each adult, or I'm sorry, 1,200 for each adult, which will be $2,400, and then they're going to get another 1,500 for each of the kids. So that's how it should work. The problem for people that owe is the IRS generally won't have a direct deposit account on file because you owe taxes. You're not getting a refund. So when you have a refund, most taxpayers will provide the IRS with their direct deposit information, and that's what they're using in order to send the payments out. So
Right.
people who owe, those are people that are either going to have to wait for a paper check to come in the mail. Again, who knows how long that'll be, or they're supposed to be able to use the tool that's on irs.gov to update it. Again, there's been a lot of issues with that so far, but hopefully, people's patience will pay off. The IRS is saying, check back once a day. They update it once a day. So check back once a day, and hopefully eventually you'll see your account and that you can update that information.
Okay. So before we move on to PPP, I did receive, so also we're live on Facebook. I'm getting comments over there. We have people in Zoom. I'm getting questions over here as well. So please excuse my eyes bouncing back and forth between the screen. Before we move on to the PPP, one viewer asked about, the $75,000 per person year income. If you make 80, then you're not getting a stimulus
You're
check.
not out. It starts to. It's called phasing out. So if you are an individual and you're not married and you make 80,000, you'll still be eligible for a portion of it. It'll just be limited to a degree. Once you hit 100,000, that's when it's totally phased out. Anybody who's single and has AGI of 100,000 or more will not be eligible for their portion of it, of the stimulus payment.
Gotcha. Okay, so we were informed yesterday that money ran out with the PPP loan, and some people have been approved by their bank, which now means it's just going over to the SBA for approval. Some people are still waiting in limbo for approval from their bank. What do you know? What happens now?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's an unprecedented program. Unfortunately, people were kind of stuck with they're at the mercy of their bank. So if you're working with a bank that has their act together, you were lucky, and your stuff went through. I have clients that were able to submit the day of or the day after the plan originally rolled out, and a week later they had money in their bank account and they could pay their employees. I have other clients that I have a couple of clients that I talked to today who their bank let them know today that, hey, we can now accept your application after the money's already run out. So, I mean, there's actually banks that are just now getting the program off the ground. So that's, that is the inequity of the situation. There's also some discussion about, larger companies. Now the PPP loan, the PPP loan is eligible for companies that are under 500 employees. Okay. That's what the SBA considers a small business for the purposes of the Paycheck Protection Program.
That means there must be a lot of companies that have over 500 employees then, because to have 500 is a lot. That's a big number of employees.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a very big number, and but there's a lot of companies. There's definitely a lot of companies that fit that category. So, I believe by the numbers, the vast majority of businesses are considered small businesses by that measure. A large amount of gross domestic product probably comes from larger companies, but by the actual count of companies, we're talking about a ton of businesses. So, and also an interesting rule that's part of the PPP is that restaurants aren't held to that same standard. Restaurants, it's not 500 for the company; it's 500 per location. So you can have a Red Lobster that has hundreds of locations around the country. They probably have tens of thousands of employees, but it goes by location. So they're probably eligible at each location. In fact, somebody posted on Facebook today. I happened to read an article. I believe there was a large restaurant chain that received a $20 million loan. Now, a lot of people look at that and say, well, hey, here's this successful large restaurant getting a $20 million loan. While there's small restaurants that are shut down right now that are still waiting on their bank to get their act together. Meanwhile, and now we're all waiting on Congress to pass, the next round of funding, which we'll talk about in a second. Yeah. But if you think about it, the purpose of the Paycheck Protection Program, as it's called, the Paycheck Protection Program, in order for that money to be forgiven by the SBA, it needs to go to employees. So at least 75% or more of the money that any business receives must be paid to the employees, or they have to pay that money back to the government. So, or to the bank, whichever it may be. So, so really, it's not necessarily a bad thing that larger companies are getting it, but I think what's happening is larger companies, it's really, like I said in the beginning, it's up to your bank. If you're with a bank who has their act together, you're more likely to get the funding that you need quicker. So banks are generally going to tend to prioritize their larger customers, right? If you have a client that that does several $1 million in sales and has 300 employees, you're going to make sure you take good care of them during these times. And I think that's kind of an unintended consequence of how the IRS, how the government rolled this out. But I mean, the goal is to get as much money as possible out into the hands of employees as quickly as possible. And I mean, I don't know if I can think of any better way to do it than what they've done.
Right, right, yeah. Because I mean, I know in my industry, being the live event production industry, a lot of us are independent contractors, or we have our own company and we are the employee of our company, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what I hear you saying is, yes, though we may have submitted paperwork in time and all of that, and I'm not holding you to this, but there may be the thought process of, we are going to take care of, say, the company that has 40 employees over the one that has, say, 1 employee. At this moment, they have a bit of a priority. I never thought of it like that.
I don't know that that's I think that the end result is the same, but I don't think that's the thought process, to be honest with you. I think the thought
Okay.
process is banks are going to help their larger clients because that's more valuable business to them. And that is kind of the fundamental flaw with the SBA tasking private banks with the task of carrying out this program.
Hmm.
But they really have no other way to do it. How the government doesn't have the headspace to issue these loans. So that's why the government has to ask private banks to do it. So I don't know that there's any better way to do it, but I think an unintended consequence is that larger businesses are going to get priority because banks are going to cater to their larger businesses before they help out the smaller businesses. And there's a lot of banks that maybe don't do it that way. A lot of credit unions that join the program that I've heard people have had success with. But at the end of the day, it's unfortunate, but not every bank is handling it the same way. And I mean, really look at Bank of America, look at Wells Fargo. I mean, these are banks that took a long time to roll it out. They've had total failure to launch in a lot of cases. Bank of America in the beginning was telling people that were their business clients to go pound sand, that you needed to have a lending relationship with them in order to work with them. I think the government ultimately told them they can't do that. And they did end up opening it up. But I have several clients of Bank of America, several clients of Wells Fargo, and the vast majority of them are like you said, they're in limbo. They're waiting for the bank to finish underwriting. They're waiting for the SBA to get back to them on the approval. And it's not even a case of, I think, the larger banks prioritizing larger clients. I think it's a case of, you have a bank like Wells Fargo and Bank of America. They have hundreds of thousands of businesses that are asking for these PPP loans, and they just can't handle it. They
Right.
aren't able to handle it. So it really is a case where having a relationship with a local small bank, can really, be a good thing.
Okay. All right. Now, you had mentioned before about the funding running out, and there was something else coming along down the line.
Yeah. So Congress currently has, they're currently back and forth about passing another 250 billion to unlock for the PPP loan. So I'm very confident that will happen. So what we're telling our clients is, keep the process going,
Mm-hmm.
keep working with your bank, because as soon as this money unlocks, the SBA is going to start approving loans again. So you definitely, it's not like you're dead in the water at this point. Unfortunately, Congress isn't being as quickly as a lot of people would like them to be, because it is Congress, and they do have to argue things, and they have to try to add extra stuff to the bill. And I
Right.
don't care
Yeah.
what side of the aisle you're on. That's just the way it's going. But we're very hopeful that will pass today, or very soon anyway. And as soon as it does, you're going to start seeing, people getting funded again. So hopefully that happens today, and hopefully that unlocks, later today or tomorrow, or over the weekend, or Monday or whatever. So that's currently what's going on with Congress.
Now, what about the forgiveness aspect of these loans and what's going on?
Yeah, so the forgiveness part is the very broad strokes are published, and they have been since the CARES Act was initially passed. So essentially, if you are approved for the PPP loan, you're going to get a loan that matches 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. So if your monthly payroll stays the same, then the way the forgiveness works is you are able to include 8 weeks of payroll expenses, as well as your utilities and your mortgage, interest, or rent. Now, the mortgage, interest, rent, and utilities part, that can only be up to 25% of the loan that gets forgiven. The rest of it must be payroll. So in other words, if you want that money to be free money, you better be paying it out to employees. And that's the reason behind it. That's why.
Even if you're one of the employees.
Absolutely. If you're one of the employees, based on the way the bill's written, there's no problem. There's no problem with you continuing to pay yourself on your salary. And that's obviously going to be the case for a lot of self-employed people. They're going to get the PPP loan, and they're going to pay themselves with it. And by the way that the CARES Act is currently written, that portion that they pay themselves in the first 8 weeks should be forgivable, should be forgiven at the end of that 8 weeks. Now, what we're waiting on right now is additional guidance. So similar to how the actual original loans were paid out and were underwritten, they kind of announced the CARE Act on Friday, and then the actual rules for how the banks are supposed to do it didn't get published until almost a week later, the night before the program opened. So it's a similar kind of situation that we're in right now with the forgiveness part. It's almost a whole separate application process, it seems like, that's going to happen, where you'll need to provide your bank with proof that, hey, here's proof that during these 8 weeks, I spent money on payroll, I spent money on rent and on utilities. And here's the total amount, and here's how much I want to get submitted, how much I want to get forgiven. And then the bank, my understanding is that the bank will then submit an application for the government to basically pay off the forgiven amount of the loan. However, the guidance, the official, 100 pages of guidance that I'm sure will be coming with that, has not been released yet, and it may not for a long time. Right now, definitely the priority is to get the loans paid out. That's the big priority right now, and I think the SBA is going to worry about the forgiving part later, and and I think it's very likely that if we think the PPP loan proceeds are taking a long time, the forgiveness is probably going to take quite a bit longer, I would think.
Right. So now think, I'm a projectionist. I'm a video projectionist by trade. I'm a projectionist, right? So thinking, right, projecting or forecasting, right? You being my accountant for my business, or my CFO, how does one prepare for times like this? Obviously, this is unprecedented, right? But things happen. So then, yes, we're talking about money, we're talking about assistance from the government. But as a business owner, how do you set yourself up to strategically be prepared for situations, circumstances?
Right. I mean, obviously a pandemic is not something that I think anybody forecasts for. Somebody published on Facebook complaining about these larger companies getting PPP loans, saying, larger companies, they should have emergency funds that cover, their employees if something like this happens. Well, I don't think anybody could have seen something like this happening, and I don't think it's reasonable to expect a company to plan to not be able to operate at all for months, right? That's definitely not something that's ever happened on this wide of a scale. Maybe since 1918 when the influenza pandemic happened. But what I think business owners do need to be prepared for is for adversity in general. Sudden downturns, things that happen, lawsuits, losing a key employee. these are all negative things that do happen to businesses on a fairly regular basis. And really, it's access to capital. So capital can kind of come in a couple of ways. It can come as retained earnings, that are money you leave in the bank from profits that you've had. It can also come from debt. So you can have a line of credit. Maybe you can have a $50,000 line of credit with your bank, so that if something happens and you need the extra capital, you can tap on your bank and get that. And it can come in the form of investors as well. You might have investors that capitalize your business. But at the end of the day, companies should always, just like if you talk to your financial advisor, they're going to tell you, the first thing you should do is have an emergency fund. You should have 4 to 6 months of savings of your monthly costs to take care of you, just in case you lose your job, or you have a bad diagnosis or something like that, and you're not able to work. The first thing you need to do, and I've had many financial advisors tell me that they advise this, is to have an emergency fund to get yourself through the short term while you figure out how to handle the long term. So I think businesses should always follow that same advice, and try to save up, try to follow that same advice, try to have 4 to 6 months of operating expenses. Obviously in a time like this, companies that aren't able to operate, you're not going to be operating at the same level. So you're not if normally your costs are $10,000 a month, right now, maybe all you have to worry about is paying your rent. Maybe that's the only expense that you really have, because you're not doing jobs or whatever have you. That's the amount of savings that any business should really have, would be enough to get them through 4 to 6 months. So that in a case like now, if every business had 4 to 6 months of operations saved up, then they'd be okay. Now the problem is, the employees. I don't think any company, if you have a lot of employees, is able to save up enough money to cover all their employees for 4 to 6 months. And that's why
Yeah.
that's why this is unprecedented times, and that's why the government really needs to step in like they are and do these PPP loans. But for someone like in your shoes, someone that like a lot of people listening that are independent contractors, have that 4 to 6 months, make that a goal, to have that 4 to 6 months saved up, once things are opened up again. Work on that, and that way you'll have, if something bad happens, if you have a downturn in business because of whatever reason, because it's not going to, hopefully we don't have another pandemic for another 100 years or more, and hopefully next time around we're better prepared. But other bad stuff can happen, as we've all seen. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, yeah, Patrick, I really appreciate you taking the time, and the knowledge that your firm, Murtha and Murtha, has, and the time that you're giving of yourself to share this information with us. So I know we're talking about doing this every Friday at 1 o'clock now, and one of the things that we're going to talk about next week is the 3-phase opening plan for the country, right?
Yeah, so I would have loved to have talked about it today, but it's so brand new, and the world is, the U.S. is still trying to figure out what's going on. But the government announced last night some guidelines to issue basically to states as to when it's appropriate to start opening up the economy, and then 3 phases to slowly open the economy in a safe way to avoid resurgence of the virus. So yeah, we can definitely talk more about that next week.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So for all the listeners, know that we are, or not even just listeners, all the viewers, know that we are taking questions in both boxes, on Facebook and in Zoom if you've called in. So next week, when we have this same bat time, same bat place, make sure you have your questions in there so that we can help provide you what you're looking for. This is Ask the Service Provider, and we want to be able to answer your questions. So like us, follow us on the social media platforms, Clemco AV. Murtha and Murtha is also on social media platforms. And until then, I guess we'll see you next week. Sound good, Patrick?
Yeah, sounds good. Stay safe, everybody. And Clem, thanks for the opportunity, and we'll talk.
All right, sounds good. Bye.
All right, take care.
Hey, baby boy, lying sound asleep. I hope you dream of lullabies and clowns. The more you open your eyes, the harder to believe. So here's a song for you when you are down, are down. 'Cause only heaven knows what to make of these changing times. Before the night, let's just leave it all behind. I know this world's so cold, but don't let teardrops change your mind. So for tonight, let's just leave it all behind. Hey, hey baby boy, lying sound asleep. They say a child like you's one of a kind. God will guide us. We dream of life playing in the sun. So please don't ever be afraid to shine.